Okay, did you get that?
Yes, yes, all good. Thank you. Hello,
Okay.
nice to be with you, Sean.
Dan, thank you so much for your time today. Super excited to be on the phone to be able to talk with you. And today we're going to talk about medbed technology and in general plasma medbed technology and some of the technology that you've developed, which is the Theraphi technology. So thank you so much for your time today. And where would you like to start? Where would you like to begin?
Well, I thought it would be good if we tried to get in some of the serious science behind what's called medbed, what is called Theraphi, and how Priore is behind that, and to try to talk about the serious science in a way that the average layman can understand, but still it's serious science. That's my intent here.
Perfect.
And so for one thing, the subject of medbed is popularized in part as more and more people become interested in the extraterrestrial history of Earth and the new information we have about extraterrestrial involvement. As you know, I'm involved with Elena Danaan and some of the other SSP experiencers and have a lot of background in that story. My work on teaching the extraterrestrial history is at fractalfield.com/fusion in the blood. And that's the context of how a lot of people became interested in the concept of medbed, because they see these cool Star Trek-like pictures. But, you know, where's the biology? Where's the physics? And I think there's two things that people, as I mentioned in our conversation with Marie, that people should know about the serious science behind what's called medbed. One is that if you make a cell, literally your biological cells in your body, happy enough in an ideal media, those cells do what's called de-differentiate, which is to become a stem cell, which is, say, they revert to their past childhood when they could branch perfectly in all directions. Literally, the word stem then means at the stem of the fractal. And the magic of getting a stem cell to de-differentiate and become able to branch in all healing directions at once. You know, in biology, if you're in a biology class, they tell you, well, you put it in a container and then you get every circumstance ideal. So that cell is blissfully happy, which is temperature, nutrient, everything is perfect in a media called plasma, but in that case, it means cellular liquid plasma. And so if that cell gets happy enough, it literally de-differentiates, which is to say, goes back to its past, which is, you know, I call that negentropy, which is return to order, which is literally backwards in time. So in conventional biology, they use a condition like a bed in which to have that cell be able to de-differentiate, which is to say, instead of specialized, become a generalist at the root or stem of the fractal. So that's one aspect of what's in a medbed, is the environment to make your cells happy. But the other aspect of what a medbed would be is very much related to what Theraphi and plasma is doing in rejuvenation and negentropy, which is time reversal. How do you make that cell go backwards in time? And that aspect of the medbed, which is a time reversed field, is very much what Theraphi and, you know, plasma medbed is about. And to understand what that is electrically is not even that hard. First of all, when physics first invented time reversal, they took two lasers and they made them meet perfectly. So you got these waves that converge perfectly from opposite directions from two lasers. And they meet in what's called a phase conjugate dielectric, which is a time reversed mirror. It's called a phase conjugate mirror. And the reason they call it time reversal is because when the wave arrives at that phase conjugate mirror, the super dielectric, they say it goes backwards in time, but what they really mean, it retraces the path back where it came from, which happens to be literally a return to order. And as I've said many times, in the physics that has been measured of time reversal, you can time reverse back to order, but you can't time reverse to disorder. So the time reversal that physics has measured is functionally equivalent to negentropy or self-organization. So all that being said, now what we have with the Theraphi, for example, is yes, we're taking a phase conjugate beam, but not only do we have the phase conjugate optics from a noble gas, and by phase conjugate, simply visualize a caduceus, that little pine cone kissing noses. But we make that pine cone much bigger because we match the integrity of the frequency cascade of the noble gas, which is phase conjugate optics in the Theraphi plasma tubes, with the 500,000 volt RF sub RF modulating drive frequency from the amplifier with an infrasound cascade. And here it's key, that infrasound cascade is the Schumann harmonics and is the brainwave harmonics for bliss, the perfect frequencies to trigger bliss in binaural beats. So we've got that infrasound, it's a cascade. We've got the RF and we've got the phase conjugate optics, and they're all in phase, golden ratio times Planck, my equation for negentropy. So we make a big pine cone of phase conjugation. For example, the EE system does use phase conjugation, but they simply have a computer screen, so it's limited to a very narrow visible optical band. So our phase conjugation is much bigger, consistent with reports that ours is much faster. And similar to Lukovsky, he was using golden ratio, but again, the phase conjugation was EM, but it wasn't high megahertz, and it certainly wasn't optical, and it wasn't infrasound. So we have a bigger pine cone kissing noses. So at the center, in this case, you are the phase conjugate mirror when those two pine cones kiss noses, and you're in the sweet spot between the two tubes. Hopefully, that centripetal implosive negentropic compression, and that's the key to pain reduction, all the fun stuff. It actually, I was just talking to a friend who had this experience. He said, it always hits me the next day. I feel much stronger. And the athletes in South Africa told the same story. So we're creating a broad spectral phase conjugate field. And so that means the cell itself can pursue that time reversal, that negentropy. So there's two aspects of the classical medbed, which is a media where the cells can be happy. And it's very important, by the way, in the Theraphi, that your cells are happy. That means in the live blood cell trials, everybody's cells declumped, except those people, 10%, who reported they were not able to relax fully. Those people did not get the blood declumping effect in the live blood cell trials. So clearly, if you can't relax really good, it's not so good. And it's understandable why, because relaxation makes you conductive. So you do need to relax, becoming conductive, which is what a super dielectric is, basically, a good capacitor. So I've carried on. Maybe you have questions before I go much further, but that's an introduction to the science behind medbeds. And by the way, Antoine Priore was famous in South France, the antecedent for the Theraphi, because he inherited frequencies from Lukovsky and Rife, which were close to, but not accurately phase conjugate. And we don't think Antoine Priore even knew what phase conjugation was, because he didn't even use a pair of tubes, which are essential. But Antoine Priore had healed, and he had helped thousands of people with cancers, documented French government. And we just found that he had approximated phase conjugation. When we saw his frequencies were close, then we knew the principle behind, and that's when we built the Theraphi in respecting what Priore had done for many years. And that's all at the website.
Yeah, that's actually beautiful history, and I love the fact that the technology itself builds from previous people along the way, and you're able to take their work and then push it forward. And I think that's really the beauty of it all. And I do like the fact that we're starting off with extraterrestrial and getting into what I would call off-planet technology, because when people are talking about medbeds, I think a lot of the medbed technology is sort of off-planet based technology based on various programs it might be used with. Certainly, there's probably some stuff that's being used in sort of top secret programs here on planet, but a lot of it is off-planet technology. And so when people start talking about medbeds and medbed technology, I really do like the fact, Dan, that in all your videos that you've got, that we really do break down and have a very good understanding of what a lot of this off-planet technology is, how it works, what it does. And I think the beauty of the Theraphi and the plasma technology, the real medbed technology that we have available right now, is that we have all of the powerful components that are needed. And as somebody that's in the medical industry, I can tell you that when you start, you don't need the pod, you don't need all this outer shell. I mean, it does have that fancy look, and it does look very attractive, and certainly there's probably places where it is actually used. However, you bring that aspect into it, you double or triple the price, you make it extremely hard to ship, you make it extremely hard to move around, and in many cases, it's just straight up unaffordable. But if you take the real nuts and bolts of what the technology is that's really doing all the heavy lifting, that's really making this happen, it is that generator that you were talking about. It is those noble gases in those tubes. And if you have that technology and understand what it is and what it's doing, and you could really, just get really right to the heart of what it is that's actually performing, sort of the heavy lifting in this case.
Well, that's true. And it's also true that, if you're not going to spend big bucks for a pod, it does make sense to be aware of what they did in that pod. Inside the pod was some negative ions, for example, some high dielectric, an environment in which the capacitance could implode. And so how that translates to your Theraphi means that you do want to be aware of where it's sitting, specifically, similar to well-proven negative ion wind therapy, that Theraphi plasma is just really like a huge negative ion wind cloud. That's what it is. And that is hospital proven, by the way. Negative ion wind is profoundly healing. It's well known. It's because it's implosive. Well, the Theraphi plasma cloud is like a very big and partially self-aware negative ion cloud. That's what it is. And the physics is that negative ion wind and Theraphi plasma do not like it if there's lots of metal sitting around, because crash, there goes out the negative ion cloud, the living plasma. So you want it in a room with natural material, which is called high dielectric, wood and natural material. You don't want a lot of synthetics or metal around, because the cloud, the negative ion cloud, which is self-aware, or the plasma, the living plasma, will crash. Also, you want live air, because literally Theraphi it will actually accrete charge from its environment. And if the environment is dead air and electrosmog, it ain't quite so good. Whereas people who have these things set up in, anything close to nature, natural environment, kind of like an altar, they have fabulous result. The elementals wander over, they have a ball. So that's one thing to bear in mind, is what they created inside that pod is an environment which is charge permissive. So you want to do that a little bit with your Theraphi, is, living natural space, etc., and avoid a lot. A little bit of metal, a nail in the bed is okay, but very large metal structures too close, and the plasma cloud actually crashes. So that's part of that. And the other part of the information is that this centripetal charge will accelerate circulation and metabolism, which is great, because anything that causes centripetal force tends to self-organize. It's obvious. That's called negentropy, or, quote, healing. But it also means that acceleration suggests that you do want to be aware of hydration and grounding. So the symptom of too much is a bit of a buzz. So hydration and grounding are important. And hydration is what actually drives your body. So some living spring water with lemon and those things after you're feeling that buzz, so you can ground. And then, read the book Earthing, because your phase relationship to ground is what establishes your centripetal inertia. So barefoot in the mud afterwards is kind of good, or, whereas if you're walking in thick rubber sneakers on metal reinforced cement sidewalk and you never get anywhere close to ground, it ain't good for anybody.
No, it's not good.
It's
not good. And I've actually, there's the grounding, the book, the gentleman is slipping my mind right now, but there is the documentary that's on YouTube, which I've watched at least 15 times.
Yeah, Earthing is very good, very good, and wonderful.
And honestly, it's actually mind blowing that that knowledge really isn't common, thing. But it's so important. And Dan, it does tie back into other stuff that you get into a lot, which is talking about Aboriginal people, talking about the knowledge of them being able to work with and manipulate plasma energy, talking about the ley lines, talking about them being able to feel the pain of a tornado, working with that, and some amazing things. One of the last videos that you did, maybe in the last month, was talking about how an Aboriginal person was in a trance, and they were asking him what he was doing, and he was basically changing the flow of a river like 10 miles down.
Yeah.
And
this
is the kind of stuff. Go ahead.
It's so classic. You know, they say an amateur dowser will move the water vein back into the well by using a hammer, percuss, and piezo, whereas an advanced dowser moves the water vein back into the well by talking to it. And what enables you to talk to a water vein is the same thing that enables a shaman to steer a tornado. You have to be able to feel it in your body as if it's you, literally turning inside out, recursively imploding, and then you see your plasma embed in the tornado. Well, guess what? Lots of our Theraphi centers say that the plasma cloud eventually, around your Theraphi, if the environment is good, comes to have a mind of its own. It's like a pet puppy dog or your pet kitten. And your pet kitten is going to run its motor to heal the people it likes. And if somebody comes in the room with a sort of a negative attitude, your pet kitten, I mean, your Theraphi, regard that plasma cloud as your child. Like ball lightning, you can do telepathy. Well, that plasma cloud will become increasingly self-aware. And if you love your puppies, I mean, your plasma cloud, I mean, you get the flavor that you're identifying with the cloud itself as part of a self-aware field. And this, it beautifully does get you into this subject of all the ancient wisdoms. I do have a few slides I prepared here if you want.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so this was just a little bit more on the science. And actually, are you seeing the physics of ascension slide here?
Yes.
Okay, so just briefly, we've been teaching for years what the physics of ascension, which obviously is when the short waves embed in much longer waves in your body, your aura gets bigger. So it's a rotation superposed, and that's the definition of ascension. So when you get a broad spectral effect in your aura, you get longer waves embedded in your aura, bigger tornadoes, and that's called ascension. It's actually not just superposed harmonics, but superposed axes of spin rotation called dimension. And the practical application of this, for example, we have this slide here, testimonial that we have triggered lucid dreaming replicably even with Theraphi from our Theraphi blog. If you look at the science literature, remember why lucid dreaming is so important. It means your aura got coherent enough that you could see outside your body, which, by the way, predicts pretty well who's going to take memory through death. So practicing lucid dreaming is useful. So if Theraphi is triggering this, what is it doing? Well, here's the science literature showing the frequencies they've used in science to trigger lucid dreaming, 25 and 40 hertz, very close to the 29 and 47 hertz predicted by my equation, the infrasound of Theraphi. So we know that is simply the low frequencies of implosive compression, literally implosive squeezing. And implosive squeezing, as in the Grail vision here, this lady saw the Grail when she was in the Theraphi. Squeezing is what enables the body to emit coherent longitudinal, which is literally the array. So this is the picture of the Theraphi. That's the noble gas plasma tubes. This is the broad spectral amplifier. The newer one has a control panel here, which is a timer. And on the right, you see the bifiller Tesla coil, which spits out 500,000 volts in two bifiller frequencies that are exactly 180 degrees out of phase to phase conjugate. And here's the French version, thanks to Valerie. So we're doing a big conference up in Paris shortly. That's what this is part of. But you see, in the ancient Egypt, when they said they were building a Shem unto the Lord, what they meant was they're building an electric field that reverses aging. That's what they meant by the term Shem, which was translated to mean the altar in the church. Actually, the altar in the church is a name for a capacitor that makes an electric field that reverses aging. And indeed, they were using a high voltage in noble gas because the Anunnaki at that time, their biggest problem was premature aging. And so this is the background. I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Well, just this is actually really beautiful because with some of the other videos that you've done, it does tie back in. But I remember the one you did with Sam from Bosnia, and it was talking about the pyramids and how they were basically there to stabilize the Earth's energy. It was the first wireless system, but because the Earth's atmosphere was aging these Anunnakis so fast, they needed to kind of rejuvenate. And this is, this is really, I when I talk to people, I feel like this is a really important part of the history of the whole thing, because we're reintroducing technology that's already been used, and we're reintroducing technology from obviously the Anunnaki We're probably, when it came to master craftsmen, we're way above the chart with what they could do in their technology. But basically, Dan, you have recreated what through physics what these people were doing thousands of years ago, and I just find it absolutely amazing. And I think it's really important for people to understand the history of some of this technology, understand more of the history of our planet, understand a little bit brighter, understanding of where we're at, where we come from. And and even though we're talking med beds and that, this technology and the physics of this does kind of branch off into some other areas.
And it's so cool. They called it a shem from the term chem, as in alchemy, and Sitchin translated meaning highward firestone. What he meant was implosive capacitor. So in fact, when they said, I will build a shem unto the Lord, an altar in the church, what they meant was, I will build a small black hole, Chem being the original name for Egypt, the place of the black soil, the black earth, and the black Nubian. So to make a small black hole is to make implosion. That is exactly the point. So that's your power, is to make that vortex. And just to finish these couple of slides, so you see here, I don't know if you can see in the middle, the frequencies Antoine Priore used by report, 3, 10, 32, and 80 hertz. And when we learned those, that's what he got from Lakhovsky and Rife, that he was within just very, very close to the actual cascade, which is my invention, origin of biological negentropy. You take Planck and multiply by integer powers of golden ratio, and you get this cascade, which is precisely, by the way, the Schumann harmonics and the brainwave bliss harmonics. So the correct frequency, not 3, it should be 2.78, 11.8, 30.88, 50, by the way, and 80. So then we knew that how Priore got it working was, in fact, by approximating phase conjugation. And then we perfected that phase conjugation. And by the way, Priore reported dramatic effect on seeds and plants, and many Theraphi owners do as well. And probably you've seen this in the live blood cell trial slides at theraphi.net. But on the left, you see the very clumped up cells, and on the right, you see the D rouleau after Theraphi. We did this trial years apart, and always we get the same effect. Cells on the right are after Theraphi, which means they're strong enough to stand by themselves, a D rouleau declumping, and that's the effect of charge implosion. Actually, it's fairly analogous to what Pat Flanagan got with epitaxial water. And just to say, we're having a new parallel technology with Theraphi, piezofire.com. You will see soon that we create a microfield, a very small device, and can focus in and do all kinds of cool stuff. So more soon on that, piezofire.com. But we won't carry on today. So anyway, just a few slides.
Super happy. Yeah, I'm super happy you shared that thing with the blood cells, because that's a problem right now. There's a lot of people that are having problems with the clustering of the blood, and the integrity of the blood cell wall basically gets compromised through a whole host of different things. And there's a lot of stuff out there now that's accelerated that. But when you're getting the benefits of using the plasma medbed Theraphi technology, you're instantly restructuring those blood cell walls. You're lowering the viscosity, technically lowering blood pressure. You're taking a lot of pressure off the body to have to push that coagulated blood all over. And, that's just one of the many benefits. Now, this is just, I'm just so happy right now, because I've been wanting to, just sit down and chat with you for a while.
Well, just to say, the core electrical engineering there is that charge circulation perfected is circulation perfected in general. And the primary function of blood actually is charge circulation. So if the charge is circulating well, that's the media, the helix of DNA in the blood is an electric imploder. That's its function. So, and of course, many people believe, the VAC side effects and the clump up is the opposite of circulation. So anything that would serve circulation, and that's the point, that's why we're often able to help people who have loss of circulation, loss of feeling in extremities. Adding circulation is something that, plasma obviously does very well. And the other thing that's just very basic is the same effect of a centripetal field, that when you realize the very basic electrical engineering, that pain is defined as charge that's bleeding due to fractality that's broken, which means compression is broken. So Almost any doctor knows compression is the opposite of pain. Restored compression that's the first thing you do when you got pain, obviously, restore compression. So a compression field is very logical. When the first doctors cut their finger in our first Theraphi demo, and within seconds, the pain was gone in the plasma. So localized pain, obviously, we have many, many reports. And the physics is so simple to understand that restored compression is the opposite of pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to steer off too fast because I can do this really quick, but I know that, that's the same principle with the tornado. When the tornado basically loses compression, that's when things are going to start really getting problems. And that's why you see all these metal buildings and that getting just absolutely destroyed, because it basically is.
Yeah, what we think is, the metaphor that's used when you teach shaman how to steer tornadoes, first of all, if you ask the shaman, what are you doing? You're watching the shaman. If you're clairvoyant, you see the bioplasmic streamers from the belly of the shaman travel and literally embed in the center of the tornado, and the shaman's aura becomes the gravity, the centripetal force of the tornado. That's when the shaman is steering the tornado. But if you ask the shaman what he's doing at that moment, he will tell you, I'm eating the hucha, by which he means I'm eating the anger or eating the pain. And to feel the pain of the tornado actually is to feel whatever is causing its charge to bleed, which is to say whatever it's preventing compression. So charge bleeding is defined as pain, and if compression breaks, that's when you get pain. And when a tornado is traveling over a metal trailer park, it's feeling pain because its capacitance is bleeding. So that's painful, right, in a tornado. So obviously the tornado is going to, whereas a tornado you will never find a tornado destroying a sacred stone temple ever, because that feels like part of its body. Doesn't need to hurt that.
Yeah. I love that. So, Dan, we're getting into some basic stuff here, but, and I understand a lot of this information. First off, I've heard many times with you going into, I mispronounce his name. I call him Priore, but it's
Antoine Priore. Antoine Priore, French. Yeah.
But I do remember many times when you're looking at those numbers and you're saying, wow, that's what we would call the smoking gun, because you're looking at those numbers that he's got, and then you're taking the Planck times golden ratio and going, oh my God, this is it. And then dialing those into a 1/100th. I mean, really dialing in those frequencies and really taking that work and going, oh my God, this is what they were finding, although they didn't know exactly how they were doing it. But, taking that, pushing that technology and moving it forward. And I do want to get back to talking about Priore in a second, but there is one thing that I do think is really important for people to understand, and that is the power of intention and how intention works with these plasma technologies. Because when you're doing this phase conjugation process, that plasma energy field, as it becomes recursive, basically does become a mindful and intelligent energy field. And so it's technically tapping into the frequency that the DNA is running on, if I remember correctly. And so when you're actually sitting in a mindful and intelligent energy field, and you understand intention, which is basically also plasma energy, a plasma energy tornado per se, there's a whole nother dimension to this technology that's well beyond just a third dimensional sitting into it. And I'm glad that you did talk earlier about the power of relaxation and the power of, being calm when you're using this. But before we go any further, can you touch on, the mindful, intelligent energy field, how, kind of what it's created and how important intention is when you're using this type of technology?
Yeah, that is exactly the point. The psychology of pure intention is actually literally the physics of perfected charge collapse. And charge cannot collapse, implode, and make a tornado unless there's a path through center. And the path through center is literally where the wave becomes shareable, named distributable. And that implosion at center, which is tuned to Planck, is absolutely related to whether your vision, your intention, is going to create something that creates long-term collective survival, literally a shareable wave, or pure principle, you could call it, or eureka. So if your intention is truly shareable, the plasma of that mountain is going to come to you. Whereas, because the plasma in the mountain and the plasma in the river knows that you're going to provide a path to perfect distribution if you have pure intention, which is, say, a shareable wave. Whereas if you're angry with someone, or if if you're somewhere want to hurt someone, whatever it is, it's just like going through death successfully. You absolutely cannot do it if you're angry, because you can't do compression well. Healing and death and a lucid dream all require the same thing, a small black hole. So how that translates basically is, as you're sitting there, and wherever the pain, the issue is, it's perfectly appropriate and necessary to focus on the path to healing, but in the process to be very aware that your intent is that that healing will also serve the collective survival, the communion of saints, ancestor memory, however you want to call it. The Aboriginals called ancestor memory God, but ancestor memory is literally the collective survival that's served by perfect symmetry. And you can't get into that compression field, which is the longitudinal array, which is the collective unconscious, unless literally you're part of a shareable wave. So as you sit and visualize and set your intent, absolutely, that's how you're going to steer that plasma tornado, and be aware that pure intention will make that implosion stronger.
That's beautiful. And let me just a sec here. I'm just going to hit this again. So so being in that, and I know you've talked about wormholes and other types of plasma. I mean, plasma in general, and Paul's talked about it really well as well, that plasma is 99.9% of the universe. And it's interesting, Dan, we talk about all these ancient civilizations, and they always talked about the sun god. And me being kind of a Westerner would think, oh, the sun god. But once you understand that the sun is plasma energy, and it is actually a mindful and intelligent energy field, then all of a sudden this sun god stuff really starts making sense. It really starts tying in. Absolutely. And when you start understanding that 99.9% of the universe is actually plasma, it really starts connecting a lot of dots, not just with this technology, but with just everything that's going on within our universe, within everything around us. And I think watching all your stuff over the years it's enlightening is probably not even a good enough term, because it goes way beyond that. But it connects dots on a spiritual, religious, physics, day-to-day health. I mean, there's just so many different things that I have learned, by following your channel. Anybody that's out there, actually, I'm going to just say, please subscribe to Dan's channel if you really want to just get some amazing information. Now,
it's just to say,
yeah.
youtube.com/Dan Winter Fractal Field, 3 million views, 350 lectures. But just to say also about plasma is actually a superfluid of charge, compression, and rarefaction, of which the universe is made. And it becomes intelligent, which is to say self-aware, when it's recursive or implosive. And an example of the intelligence of the sun there, which is a beautiful point you made, also would be, a lot of people are doing remote healing with Theraphi, and we teach that's not a mystery, and it's important physics. For example, it works better at sunrise and sunset, just like Agnihotra, because that's when the sun is at a phase conjugate angle, enabling embedding in the longitudinal array, which is the physics of all remote healing and remote action. So once you understand how this longitudinal array is working, we're creating scalar longitudinal, then you can understand remote healing also much better, living plasma.
So Dan, a couple things. First off, I want to talk about some of the stuff that Priore was doing and some of the results he got. You touched on some of that before. When people ask me what is the Theraphi, what is the plasma, medbed technology, technically it's everything and anything. I mean, technically it's working within the biofields. There's so many different things. I think first off, we can get into third dimensional bodily stuff, because theoretically, that's why a lot of people come to look for this technology. But I think that really the real goal and the real higher level understanding is understanding what it's doing. I guess I want to say from a spiritual and metaphysical perspective, but we when you're starting to use the Theraphi technology, now we're talking about getting into lucid dreaming. We're getting into basically separating your plasma body from your physical body, having the ability to do that, which at some point, I don't want to say it supersedes death, but it basically makes that transition much easier. And when you start developing those skills, and a lot of people really, like I said, they come to initially say, well, I need a med bed. Well, yeah, because, something's gone sideways with the body. But I think that, for people out there that are really looking for the benefits of this technology, goes way beyond fixing your physical body. It goes well into, when I start getting in and using this technology, we're talking about increased intuition. We're talking about increased ability to do manifestation. We're talking about higher frequency, being in more loving frequency. There's just so many things, and then you get into the lucid dreaming and all these other things. And we can talk about third dimensional bodily stuff here as well, but I really feel like this is the main part of this technology that really definitely needs to be addressed, and people need to know that this is really where this technology goes, and it's way beyond what people think it is. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Well, thank you. That's very nicely put. Thank you so much. Just one practical example that might bring that home. Our friend Carlos, who runs a beautiful healing center in Barcelona, Family Constellation, which is basically deep trance for dealing with trauma. And so the point, why do you need trance to deal with trauma? Well, obviously, the main issue with trauma is that you disconnected from your line of memories at the moment of max pain. So you have to go back and grab the hole in memory and fill the hole in memory. Otherwise, there's a hole in your aura. So you really have to relive the moment when you said, when you left your body and didn't remember the pain, because that's part of your continuity, which is charge inertia for your aura. So you have to go back and find where you disconnected. Now, to do that, you need, obviously, implosion into the array. And in psychoanalytical terms, that's called trance. The point was, in the Family Constellation Center, very advanced there in Barcelona, Carlos quite many times proved that Theraphi was dramatically helpful in helping people into deep trance faster and deeper, replicably, in a clinical setting. And why that's important, because that's when you go into your center, that deep center, the longitudinal node, the core self, the absolute still point. And that's where you can then reconnect the array and find the lost memory. So any therapist will tell you trance is what you do to get to that center. But when we proved that we can help people into trance deeper and stronger and much faster with Theraphi, and it's obvious why the same infrasound frequencies that you use to induce bliss in brainwaves is the infrasound driver of the Theraphi plasma, which is centripetal. And that makes that inner vortex plasma tornado have greater focus and therefore greater depth and leverage on the array. So that's a practical example of the psychological meaning of Theraphi plasma as a trance induction tool.
That's beautiful. And the other thing is, this is another subject that I know you've gone into many times, and I just want to bring it up, but you brought up the word aura. And when we're talking about the aura, which is basically your biofield, right? The aura that goes around your body, when you're getting in issues where, there's a lot of different things. Let's just say alcoholism or certain types of things. You can basically create holes in this aura. And I'm sure there's a whole host of things. You might know even more, but I know that there's certain things that are definitely going to do that. And then when you start having those issues, now you're picking up what we would call the hitchhikers or the plasma parasites. And the plasma parasites now are a whole nother situation and whole nother problem. And, I look at the stuff that you're talking about, Dan, and I picked this up and I'm thinking, it's just a guy that's an observer. I see a lot of, I've known people that have had problems with alcoholism, and the next thing you know, they're saying, oh, well, they're bipolar or they're this. And I'm thinking, yeah, I think they probably have picked up some plasma parasites. I think this bipolar, a lot of these different things that they're addressing, it's probably, I think it's more plasma parasites. And there's the doctor, phenomenal woman. The woman who's a shaman out of California that you've done videos with, is it? But I know that you've had people using this plasma Theraphi, the medbed technology, and literally seeing ghosts getting bounced off of them, you know, from being in that plasma energy field. And, you know, that's a real reality that is really, like, from a physics standpoint, is 100% real. But that's not a reality that we're embracing right now in Western civilization.
Yeah,
And instead of saying, you know, let's jump into the Theraphi and just bounce this out and get our aura back and kind of get things going, we're saying, well, hey, you know, let's just write a prescription and we'll figure it out. But, you know,
no,
that's certainly, yeah.
it's,
So do you want to just touch on that a little bit?
it's beautiful that you brought that up. Yes. So the GDV, gas discharge visualization, now BioWell, our friend Professor Korotkov, is frequently used to measure holes in the aura, which is a great discussion to have if your teenager wants to use recreational drugs. You measure the holes in the aura. It's not subjective. The reason the aura gets holes in it is, and we have good replicated GDV studies with Theraphi showing the aura dramatic improvement, many places in the Theraphi blog, et cetera. But the reason the aura develops holes is obviously just asymmetry, but it's asymmetry of compression. So obviously restored compression makes the aura more implosive, and then it will become more symmetric. And it's also obvious that holes in the aura mean you're much more susceptible to astral parasites. I used to say my friends who did a lot of ayahuasca, they were more able to see astral parasites, but they were also more afraid of them in many cases because their aura was more porous, actually. I'm not saying in general, but so the continuity of the aura is an important thing. And the aura is just plasma, obviously. It's a weak charge field. But to measure, and the way Korotkov does that with the GDV BioWell is he measures the Kirlian, which is just the radiating capacitance of the fingerprint. And by making a map of the capacitance, the charge radiance of each fingertip, and extrapolating that with classic acupuncture knowledge about the connection between the fingertip acupuncture meridian geometries versus the glands of the body, you get a very good map of the whole aura of the body just from the 10 fingers of GDV Kirlian. It's called a clinical calibrated Kirlian. Point being that then once you see the holes in the auras, you can begin to understand why if you go into a bar where a lot of alcohol is, there will be lots of plasma parasites. The reason is because everyone's aura has lots of holes in it. And these plasma parasites, obviously, you know, this is called astral hygiene 101. And it's critical.
Yeah.
Most people don't even have a clue that astral hygiene is a word, but it's probably one of the most important subjects in the library, actually. And so astral hygiene, what it effectively means is that your aura will burn out stomach parasites and astral parasites in either case if it's imploding, because at the center of implosion, all waves are sorted into phase, with the emphasis on the word sorted, as in just after a big fight in an Irish pub, lots of compression will sort. And so the sorting process is served if there's implosion, which is to say, if you have access to some form of bliss process, that will also sort both some stomach and astral parasites, which is implosive radiance again. So the point is that with restored centripetal force, you get that sorting in the aura, which is the long-term process of restoring holes in the aura.
And I think, you know, that gets into a whole nother aspect of the benefits of this, because it's building and strengthening the aura. I know that you've done a lot of documentation where you can show after just one or two uses with the technology, the aura is already getting rid of those holes. And, you know, like I said earlier, a lot of people have come to me for third dimensional, stuff with the body, but this technology goes way, 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 way beyond that. So even though we can't go too deep into each one, I feel it's important that we at least address it so that people do understand that, because this is real. You know, and you're talking about recreational drugs. You're talking about, you know, for me, I know I've had friends or people I've known over the years that appear very normal, and then they go on, unfortunately, they get tied up into, you know, a regular use of alcohol. And the next thing you know, now they're experiencing issues with bipolar. And I'm thinking, okay, and I can tell because you can look into their eyes and it's like, okay, I'm not looking at the person in there. There's somebody else looking back at me, and you can almost see that.
Yeah.
But, but I think that, the reason I bring this up is that I do think that, for people that are looking at chemical dependency issues, people that are looking at certain different things, this is another way that this technology ties in. You brought up a brilliant example with those folks that are using it for PTSD and for various types of trauma, which ties in a lot with, just all different types of things, especially with military and veterans.
Just to say, the other fundamental physics here is that fundamentally all addiction is to seek a bliss experience, because your body's immune system knows that a bliss experience is required for peak immune health. So it is appropriate that your young people are using, well, they want sex, drugs, and rock and roll. What they really want is bliss, any form. And, all travel and most of our, entertainment and rock concerts, it's all about bliss. Did you get bliss or didn't you? Well, the fact that we believe as many as 30%, particularly of women who are lying down in a Theraphi, have some form of euphoria bliss experience. And I'm not saying we can make bliss, but we help a lot of people. But the reason your body needs a bliss experience is because that implosion is the final sorting agent that enables your aura to sort itself out. So you do need a climax bliss experience that's real and biologically appropriate. And, since the brainwaves of bliss is exactly our infrasound frequency, the world's most powerful bliss binaural, that's a start. But to understand the biology of bliss, which is the biologic opposite of addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
That's
is why
beautiful.
Even the ayahuasca and the what's that they use? What did they use in New Zealand for addiction? Iboga, thank you. The Iboga schools are actually now using Theraphi with the Iboga for addiction treatment, actually.
So, one of the questions I get asked a lot. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about the aura and, and the raising the frequency and really starting to get into lucid dreaming and all these things, because I feel like that is probably the most important use for a lot of this technology. And I know that you're working with groups where you do the lucid dreaming, where, you're literally organizing groups of people that can do lucid dreaming. And, I've watched many of the videos, and I know that you can't compress anger, and that's basically going to leave you sitting here trying to, figure that out later. But initially, like I was saying earlier, a lot of people are coming to us for third dimensional stuff, right? Something in the body has gone sideways. They're under a high amount of stress, and they're thinking, oh my God, I need a med bed. And we get back into this med bed thing. And for me personally, I like to refer back to Rife. I like to refer back to Lakovsky. I like to refer back to these people and go into history and just say, well, here's what they were doing, and here's some of the results that they got. And you do your own research per se, because we definitely don't want to make claims, and we want to be careful about that. But there is enough science and there is enough physics out there that'll really give you an accurate understanding of what this technology can do. And when you're talking about negentropy and you're talking about reversal, and that reversal can only be back into perfect order, that does also give you a pretty good understanding. But you have a much deeper knowledge base with Mr. Priore. And do you want to talk about some of the stuff that he was doing with like those with the plasma systems that he was doing? I know that he had recorded amazing results with things like cancer and, but I mean, with all the different things that people have with physical ailments, what would be some of the things that the plasma Theraphi plasma medbed type technology can assist with? What would you, kind of give us sort of some general things that technology is, is used for? And you've obviously, been doing this a long time, so you've had some time to sit back and really look at, some amazing things that have happened with some of this technology.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. We cannot and do not make any medical claims, and legally we are just experimental for sure, and that's appropriate. and eventually we will have medical trials, but for now we're only experimental. That being said, cold atmospheric plasma, of which we believe Theraphi is one of the better examples. Cold atmospheric plasma is one of the hottest and most popular subject in conventional medicine today, actually, because it's so effective for so many things. And cold atmospheric plasma at its best, what makes it cold? Obviously, negentropy or phase conjugation. So we think we're pretty well along that track. But back to Priore. Well, the French government documented thousands of cancers healed effectively, apparently, with Antoine Priore's plasma device, the antecedent for what we do. Now, when you think about it, a cancer cell is the opposite of centripetal, actually, and also a cancer cell is the opposite of harmonic inclusive. Remember, harmonic inclusiveness defines immune health in heart rate variability, and harmonic inclusiveness perfected is called phase conjugation times Planck, because you can't be harmonic inclusive unless it's constructive interference. So the equation for Planck times golden ratio also happens to be the definition of perfected harmonic inclusiveness, which the Medical Association already knows defines immune health. So the way that's practically implemented in a cancer cell is quite cool, in that one of the ways in which you measure how cancerous a cell is if it's turned into a sphere. The more spherical it is, the more trouble you're in. Well, the reason is because that's loss of harmonic inclusiveness, which means that the barrier for energy to go from inside to outside is greater. The shell is harder. So a sphere is bad news for living cells. That's cancer literature summarized. And so if you restore harmonic inclusiveness, you restore charge distribution. Charge distribution is the opposite of cancer by definition. Charge distribution perfected, which just happens to be the definition of a fractal field, is charge. So you kind of get the idea. Now, in practical terms, a lot of this plasma field and the stories we have, very anecdotal, no medical claims, but that with long-term issues like the C word, longer sessions are used. You have to be very careful for hydration and grounding, but you see a shrinking effect, actually rather dramatic, a shrinking and dehydrating effect on the C, actually. And that is obvious. Why? Because you made it centripetal, and these waves in the center of there were not shareable. That's why sometimes heat alone is used to treat cancer cells. So bottom line is the logic is clear. And if you want to do an experiment, it's true that the people who are experimenting with this, remember, legally experimental only, no medical claims, but that longer sessions, very careful for hydration. And we always recommend a medical professional be involved. We recommend medical professionals, absolutely, but they do see a shrinking effect. And in the case of Victor there in New Jersey, it was dramatic and repeated. And there's just another, the newest Theraphi blog is about a pea-sized C cell that was in fact, gone in the next expiration. So longer sessions can have a shrinking and dehydrating effect, but we emphasize that is experimental.
And so in addition to that, what are some of the other things? I mean, I know that there's a lot of stuff with stiffness, soreness, arthritis, all different types of things. And actually, Dan, I think what I'd like to do is just tie this a little bit into my first conversation with you, because people are very familiar with the Rife technology, right? And with the Rife technology, and you've done some brilliant videos with Dr. Rife, and I just absolutely love that guy. What he was able to do, creating the microscope of 60,000 time magnification, but basically being able to look at these living cells back in the 20s, and what he was able to do, and then classify the frequencies that all these cells ran at. And I'll never forget one of the first calls I had, and I'm sure you don't forget, or you probably don't remember, but I said, well, you were explaining the technology to me, and I said, well, can we pick a frequency for just this? And your reply was, well, why would I peel just one little frequency off this full bandwidth of frequencies? Why would I do that? And I thought to myself, yeah, you're right. I obviously don't understand clearly what's going on here, but this is really, and Paul's actually done some brilliant work as well when you're getting into a dual tube system instead of a single tube system. And Paul's talked about how separating those two tubes and then creating that phase conjugation. And instead of just having a single tube emitting a frequency outward, actually being kind of what we maybe call being in the 0 point and being right there and in the heart of those two pine cones kissing noses, and really taking that Rife technology to a whole nother level, which once again really gets me excited, because I love the fact that that you guys are taking the work of these other brilliant people and pushing it forward. The smoking gun with the phase with the golden ratio times Planck, and all these different things that you've picked up on, which I kind of, when people ask me, I say this is third generation technology, and I kind of go a little bit into some of the early, mid, and some of that. But people out there that are looking at Rife technology, which I will always say is brilliant, I love it, but this is really kind of the next step up. And so you want to just go in a little bit about how this is kind of, picked up from a dual tube system and sort of the spectrum. You were talking earlier about it, about how the way that the system is set up, you're able to throw off a very large band of frequencies.
Yeah, what harmonic inclusiveness perfected is phase conjugation to Planck, obviously, because that's non-destructive interference and therefore non-destructive compression or implosion. I work with Professor Parker Givens and the University of Buffalo and University of Rochester team on the Raymond Royal Rife microscope, and we knew John Crane and that whole story. It's a long story, but basically he was using the birefringence of the z-axis of quartz to interfere or heterodyne the reference beam, which was going straight from the optical source. And by the way, he always used a single tube. He wasn't using a pair of tubes to conjugate.
No.
However, and he didn't know what conjugation was, but by then steering the birefringent, which is the plane of polarization of the beam that had bounced through a virus, for example, back into the same reference beam that came right from the source, and then creating a kind of Nomarsky or phase contrast microscopy interference in the plane between the reference beam and the beam that had bounced through the virus. He was able to disobey the law of physics that says you can't see anything smaller than the wavelength with which you look. And that's the physics behind Rife in a nutshell. All it took him days, although it took him days in many cases, to get it into focus in the scope that the quartz. And the birefringence of that quartz is a very interesting lesson in heterodyning. That's a whole other story. But the point was, in that process, then he was able to see in vivo what even electron microscopy decades later was able to get that kind of resolution, but only if it was dead. And because Rife could see it alive, he could see then which frequencies cause the cancer cells to live or die. And he began to make charts of that. And those are the charts that then Rife and Lukovsky and Priore then used, which led Priore to get very close to phase conjugation. But neither Rife nor Priore ever used a pair of tubes to conjugate because they didn't know what conjugation was, basically, or even that negentropy had been measured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's really amazing. It's a beautiful, it's really just amazing technology. I mean, we could probably sit here for days, weeks, and months, and hopefully, we'll get a chance to talk about it again. I do want to say I'm super grateful. I'm speaking on behalf of all your listeners. Dan, thank you so much for everything you do. I absolutely love you. I love what you're doing. You're just so saintly. You're so kind to all these people. I mean, I don't know if I told you, but when I started distributing this technology, I was actually scared to do it because I thought, oh my God, I'm dealing with Dan and this technology, and I really have to know what I'm doing in order to explain it correctly, because I'm in the medical field, and if you need to set up a surgery center or a neonatal or anything, I'm good. I got my stuff. But when I translated into this technology, I had the technology for a good solid 6 months and really wanted to get my hands on it and really kind of what I would say go back to school, because nothing that I've done in the past ever translated into it. And as I said earlier, the amount of knowledge that I've gained from your channel is unbelievable. And I'm going to put it up there again. And it's Dan Winter Fractal Field. Is that right?
At YouTube. Yep.
At YouTube. So on behalf of everybody, because you talk to a lot of people, I know a lot of people don't get a chance maybe to put this in. Thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you for putting your faith and trust in me to be able to distribute and offer this technology to the world. And before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to say to kind of finish up?
Well, yes, ultimately, it's not a gadget that fixes you, obviously. It's the understanding of pure principle. If you can visualize the shape of this implosion inside yourself, and by the way, it's literally the Holy Grail, you've done it all. And the plasma is great, and Theraphi is great, and it's wonderful. But ultimately, as more and more you take the vision of pure principle inside yourself in a self-empowering way, and it's all simple implosive wave mechanics, it's like a rose. So yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time today. I'll look forward to catching up with you again soon. We'll get this published out there. And I'll have the website for anybody that's interested in this technology. And Dan, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, but I'm going to keep you with me here for just a minute so we can just I can just say goodbye after I sign off the recording.
Blessings, everyone. Be a shareable wave.
Thank you. Okay, let me stop recording. I'll pause.